Shinlanjo Parayasho, Simjananja, Sambadam, Jada Jadava, Chantama, Chajunko, Lokordo, so Namalaya Gadan, Dana Jingantum, Tata Mi Ganamdan, Wakun Janda Gachazambat, Jakadotam Bechotendo, Boden Zavella Morimbo Janda Gajavan, Bemedin, Julan Kadin Chimbogon, Jazonda Kosonto Young, Dozado, so. Good evening. Joyous holiday to everyone who have come here for this winter meditation course here at Kibi, New Delhi, India. I'm sure all those who have come here, no matter how many times you have come here, it's always a long journey, and with each journey we all know what brings. There are a number of let's say challenges that you have to overcome just to be here, because how to say, mainly because of during the holiday times that you have to let go of many of your social engagements just to be here, and so for that I very much appreciate, as always, because I'm sure many of you normally would rather spend these times with your families and friends, of course, because as the idea of time goes by, annually one could say, conditions become more and more difficult, seems to become more and more difficult to have these precious moments where you can exchange with, whatever you wish to exchange with your loved ones and those whom you have connections with. So you have chose to come here, and it's very courageous. For those of you who have been coming here over the course of time, probably would have an idea about what we are doing here. For some of you, it may be, let's say, somehow new for you to be here, and so therefore you may not altogether know why you're here, sort of thing. So, all in all, I deeply appreciate for your attendance, and I truly hope that during these few days of practices that you will establish, as we say in a traditional sense, in a Buddhist sense, establish some form of Buddha-dharmic connection. So, having said that, first of all, I must praise you, although praising and criticizing, they all sort of go together. Nevertheless, genuinely, I want to praise all of you to not just attend these courses or talks or whatever form of, one could say, of course, meditation is a very general word, so therefore, of course, these are all great, but the first session of the practice that you all attended, and that most likely you will be attending during this course, the Sojong practice, is extremely beneficial. I'm sure the vow givers must have explained the benefit of it, not necessarily the faults of not taking those Sojong vows, but more on the side of the benefits, let's say. So exactly as they were explained, those are absolute, because whatever amount of time we are able to spend, let's say in a traditional sense, with these practices, whether we understand them, whether we are able to connect with them or not, the time that you spend could be the next 24 hours or not, or during the whole course. Through this, the amount of credit, which we say merit, in forms of wisdom, in form of merit and wisdom, which are basically forms of credit. Credibility is like a currency, which is very useful, of course. In absolute terms, it means nothing. But in our society, these are very, very useful things, and probably it's the best form of credibility. It's the best form of gaining trust. It's the best form of gaining confidence in oneself and in others. So therefore, those of you who have attended in these Sojong practices are to be extremely respected, and for that I very much appreciate. And then on top of it, then the rest of the merit or credit accumulating practices are to be built on. That's how it goes normally. That's why we take the practice of refuge, for example. Because on top of building some form of confidence, then the rest of the skills, one could say, or disciplines or conducts are built on. Of course, in terms of absolute, in an absolute sense, all of these are sort of just nothing more than words, and so therefore there are no real rules. But in terms of society, the social structure, then it is such that such conditions are required. That's why we say that in Buddhism the practice of refuge is extremely important. That type of practices are known as the commonly known as the Pratyekmoksha vows. But of course that's a very traditional way of interpreting it. Personally, I would say that they are somewhat like, well, basically what I said so far, credibility building practices. Yeah. That I do something that is visible, that is visible in your eyes, that is visible within our interaction. And so, therefore, let's say that I promise not to kill, let's say. Of course, in absolute terms, there's no way of describing actually what is killing and what is not killing. It's impossible to describe. For example, the very air we breathe, we don't know we cannot really account in terms of how many, I don't know, bacteria or that has living cells, maybe even sentient or consciousness, elements. And so therefore we absorb these, and so therefore it's almost like we are living on such appetite sort of thing. So therefore it's very difficult to differentiate. But nevertheless, according to a certain pattern, let's say, a commonly agreed pattern, yes, that we say, okay, here is a social sort of understanding of it's acceptable, what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, sort of thing. On that basis, then we can make a relative rule, and that's exactly what it is, these forms of vows or practices. So therefore, by performing that, by performing what is visible, what is agreed upon, then it can build a very unique type of currency, a kind of currency where we can have very strong trust and confidence. So it is on that we try to have a common language, common understanding, and then whatever is said afterwards are all acceptable, sort of thing, agreeable. So then on that basis, if you say something is white or something is red or something is yellow, then we can all agree. So it's something like that. But to find a common ground like this, to be able to accept, it's not easy. It's definitely not easy. Even during the times when the social sort of structure was not that global, which would be actually much easier in a way, because it's just among certain type of within maybe, let's say, limited countries, nations or continents, and even then it was still challenging. And nowadays, of course, we are all considering ourselves as global citizens, where we have to think of almost all continents, yes? So in that sense, then of course there are the social structure and the boundary and the agreements, let's say, the level of it is such that it's almost impossible to agree, let's say, of exactly what is white. Nevertheless, impossible is nothing, so to speak. So therefore, whether it is devotion, whether it's compassion, we don't know, but nevertheless, we are here, not to say freezing ourselves, but somehow it's quite pointless to have one heater here. I don't know what this will do, actually. But we all agree that this will do something, So it's something like that. But whatever be it, we are all here together, and out of our devotion, out of our compassion, whether we label that as karma or not, or aspiration or not, we are all here. We are all agreeing on something, that by doing such things, that it will bring that sensation or experience called happiness. Yeah. We commonly sort of agree, yes, that's why we are here. Otherwise, why would all of us be here? As Buddha said that we are all common in terms of we all have something in common in terms of that we all wish for happiness, wish for joy, and equally we also wish not to have unpleasant experiences. And so therefore it is with that hope, I suppose, that we are all here. And the tool that we use is those things that I mentioned: devotion, compassion, the idea of a universal law of some kind, such as karma. And so, because of all of that, then somehow we are here. And then now, based on that, we are trying to now focus on, during this particular session, do something that some form of practice that we are a little bit used to. In terms of label, it's easy to say, the practice of compassion, the practice of the Chenrizik. By now it's a very familiar structure of noise that we are used to. But if we really ask ourselves what it is, we have no idea. We will never be able to really come up with a proper answer to what it is. But according to the well-established concept, and then obviously it is the meditation practice is a very essential part of our Buddhist practice. One of the three most important part of practice. The first two being the practice of listening, and the second being the practice of whatever is being heard, to reflect upon it, then finally now here to meditate. And meditate often, I'm sure during the second session for the day, you all might have received in length what it means, taught jointly with the practice of the Ngöndo, what it is about, and to help you get acquainted, to use that practice as a sort of a gateway to get involved with how to reflect and how to meditate. So one thing that we must make sure not to get disoriented concerning whenever we are trying to concern ourselves with meditation is thinking. Because we all know that although in absolute, of course, verbalizing, meaning talking, there is no harm at all, because it's just plain noise, nothing more. It's like hearing this echo, or hearing that cough, or hearing that click of that camera, or hearing birds singing, or hearing the noise of the traffic. Any noise, it's the same thing. It's just that we have organic sort of structure in ourselves where we can mimic almost any sound that what we hear, and we are able to somehow echo that. And so we use that as a way to communicate. What's wrong with that is, so there's nothing wrong with it. But when we, let's say, like with everything, if you overuse, if you misuse, if you abuse, the ability to echo, the ability to actually make unique sets of noise, then it can cause confusion. Meaning, basically, non-perfect speech in a way. Then it can cause anger, it can cause anxiety, it can cause forms of attachment, forms of confusion. So, therefore, in a sort of a general social structure, we begin to understand that a sort of a general awareness that verbalization or too much verbalization is not good, which is correct, but then sometimes we could develop a kind of how to say aversion, one could say, a feeling of one wants to keep extreme sort of distance from such usage. And so therefore, accordingly, of course, there are methods to help us verbalize less. In almost any sort of philosophical or religious practices, such methods exist. And, for example, even in Buddhism, such practices also exist. And so, probably meditation is a part of that. But if we ask ourselves if meditation is all about that, definitely not. Because it's not just about sort of limiting or stopping just, simple chatter, but mainly to not just to mute our sort of external noise, but more than that, the internal noise sort of thing, the inner noise sort of thing. So this is just sort of a very sort of light way of describing meditation. That when we meditate, somehow it really doesn't involve thinking, because thinking is, although let's say in a visible sense it may not be noisy, but nevertheless, if it's disturbing us in terms of innerly, for example, we could be sleeping, for example. We identify sleeping as something that is necessary, something that is healthy, good, yes, that we should get this many hours of sleep per day and so on. It changes, of course, in terms of how many hours during this era and that era, according to medicine science. But nevertheless, if somehow we haven't really understood and experienced what it means not to even verbalize innerly, in a way, thinking, basically, in other words, then even our dreaming, even our sleeping is also equally not so healthy, because then that much of dream, that much of nightmare, will be there. Whereas now, if we are able to somehow acquaint ourselves with actual meditation, then we will somehow learn not to somehow give in to thinking during whatever form of practice of meditation we are doing. And so that's the point here, I think. So therefore, what I would like to convey here is that during our meditation, the actual meditation, the samadhi, type of practice is that, yes, we do use a particular target, a particular we use a particular objective, let's say, in terms of we wish to reach enlightenment, or we wish to be happy, we wish to be healthy, we wish to be more focused, all of that. Yes, those are just very skillful tricks. But beyond that, the actual aim, the hidden aim, is to actually let go of thinking. That's the real aim. The obvious sort of labels that we use by saying that by performing the practice of Genrizik, then we will become more compassionate, we will become more able, we will become more, let's say, a better person or something like that. That's really just a trick, nothing more. And this is very important to keep in mind, because we could get very confused with that trick and end up thinking that that trick is that goal, you know. That's not it. The actual goal or the achievement is somehow unexplained, which is supposed to happen naturally. But if we tell ourselves do something that is natural, of course it's impossible, yes? So therefore we have to do something that is almost forced. So therefore we force ourselves just to our conditioned mind by saying that we are doing this for a particular reason, particular purpose, for someone else, or for all sentient beings. These are all just very skillful methods. But the actual meditation, the actual benefit is supposed to take place by itself almost involuntarily. And so therefore, we give ourselves this idea that hopefully within half an hour we will have actual meditation, or maybe in an hour, or within a few hours, or within a few sessions, or days, or weeks, months, years, and so on, or lifetimes. So those are very skillful ways, but the actual meditation, sadly to say, there is no real guarantee of exactly when it will happen. But it's, I may have mentioned in the past that it's sort of like putting up the sail sort of thing, hoping that we will catch the wind. So therefore, the more we meditate or the more we practice, then somehow we will be able to, hopefully we'll be able to catch the wind, that wind. So, to get ourselves motivated, yes, we have to think of something that is probably emotional, you know, something that really moves us. It could be individually very, very different from one another. To some, it could be the idea of the everyday world being very confusing, very difficult, and I want to find a way out of it. And to some, it might be a way that I really have no other ambitions other than serving myself, that I really want to find some form of happiness, whatever form of happiness this may be. And those of us who are used to more, you know, religious practices, there we may think that this form of happiness may come through enlightenment. And some of us feel that this may come through hardship. And so therefore, putting these times, which is difficult to come by, if you do it, it's a form of hardship. It's a form of hardship practice. And so therefore by doing these hardships on myself, performing these hardships on myself, that I could find happiness. It doesn't matter. All in all, whatever forms of emotional motivations that we could use, it's fine. But the underlying sort of aspiration that the practitioners really have is that somewhere in between, something, some form of truly a real natural occurrence will take place. That's the thing. And that is very, very difficult to describe. And the best way to describe is, as I said right now, a sense of awareness that happens when we don't really think, when we don't really sort of verbalize, of course, externally, but particularly innerly, internally. So this is, of course, very difficult to force on ourselves. This has to happen by itself. And somehow the best possible conditions we can use are these sadhanas. These sadhanas are completely fake. Actually, if there were Buddhas and Bodhisattvas that are present here, let's say, if you ask them, they would truly agree that they are, that there is no real, how to say, originality in a way. That they were really made up just for the moment, just for that brief moment. If it helps the individual, then so be it. Then they would make up that lie. And that would explain the variety and the variety of practices actually. Of course, hard-headed practitioners mourn over the types of practices that have already, let's say, that have become extinct, which is actually, of course, it's a sad fact that over the course of time, many forms of sadhanas or practices were lost due to time, due to conditions, and they will never come back again in our time, or in the future for that matter. The truth of the variety of practices that exist, let's say we are supposed to have very limited resource of practices actually nowadays. Still, to newcomers and to intermediate practitioners, it seems that the varieties that, even though they are less, they are supposed to be less, it still seems very daunting to us, yes, that there are too many. How on earth are we able to keep up with so many practices? That we only have 24 hours a day and there are hundreds of practices. How will we be able to keep up with these? And the best way to describe is that they're all made up. Just as we all have unbelievable amount of, let's say, palette of, let's say, taste, for odor, for taste, for sights, sound, touches or feelings. Accordingly, I mean, just to one individual there is unlimited, let's say, palette. And then if you think in terms of collective, then numbers won't be able to contain actually how many pellets there are there. So therefore, accordingly, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, meaning those who have understood the secret, sort of, so to speak, they have to constantly come up like an artist, actually. For example, tea or coffee. I suppose before there was just probably one type of tea or one type of coffee, but now there are so almost unlimited types of coffees and teas, yes? And we are still wondering how to find more varieties. And so therefore, individuals have to come up with more varieties. And it's such a pressure. In the same way, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have to come up with unbelievable types of practices, actually, to somehow satisfy in a way the type of taste that we have in terms of how we want to be motivated. So therefore, the number of sadhanas or practices that are present today are not in any way better than the other, or more profound than the other, or much more swifter than the other. That the quality is the same, the potency is the same. But if the right method is used by the right, let's say, individual, then obviously it's the most satisfying one. Satisfying probably is not the right word in this case. Probably it's more like saying the one that motivates us the most. So therefore, the practice of Chenrezig is such that it's very universal, it's very general. It's a common language that everyone understands, that everyone speaks, and therefore why we practice it. But nevertheless, it is made up, and so therefore we don't have to sort of hammer our head by thinking, even though I have practiced compassion this diligently, that much, I still personally or individually don't feel more compassionate than when I was not practicing, or that externally I do not see any result in terms of I do not see others as enlightened or pure as before, or even after practicing, because that kind of thinking, let's say, is a type of effect, or a side effect, let's say, of having been somehow obscured by thinking only of, by thinking that the trick is everything, you know, because that's not the point. And the actual point is none other than, hopefully, through that skillful method, for example, the practice of Chenrezig, that we will be able to relate to a state of experience, one could say, where there is lack of thought, that something will occur. Because we can not really name exactly what that experience is. Of course, we have a lot of beautiful terms to discover it, to describe it. Describe it, such as Buddha nature and so on. But nevertheless, those are still labels, nothing more. And from time to time, we may have a slight indication of what that is like, and it's a bit scary, I suppose, to most of us, because that experience is somewhat uncontrolled sort of state. So therefore we feel that am I becoming crazy? It is possible to become crazy, let's say, when we experience that. If you don't have a reliable Dhamma friend or a Dhamma teacher or a spiritual teacher or a spiritual friend who can somehow assist you into describing exactly what you're going through. That it's possible that if that experience is gone unchecked, no matter how positive it is or how beneficial it is, that it's possible that we could become a little bit insane, sort of thing. So that's why the Buddha Dhamma is taught sort of very slowly, very gradually, very cautiously. That's the main reason. It's not because it's scarce or one doesn't want to give up one's own knowledge. It's because that experience, no matter how beneficial it is, it has to be taught with proper supervision sort of thing. So that's why these are things to keep in mind. First of all, to recap, that reason why we meditate, or what meditation is not to think, is to find a way, is to find a state where we don't think. And hopefully through that experience, then we will not, jump into ideas or conclusions that this is it, that this is enlightenment, or that this is the escape sort of thing. That we don't judge, that we don't label anything. So hopefully, once again, during this time, during this course again, over the course of these few days, we will be able to accumulate, first of all, credibility among ourselves, yes, meaning merit, and wisdom, accumulation of these two kinds of credits, and then through that, then hopefully we will be able to relate to the idea, relate to the state of, how do I say it? Non-verbal sort of experience. Good luck to us. So now, of course, our chanting master will perform the recitation aspect of the practice, and during that time, obviously we will try to read the phonetic aspect of the practice, which is in Tibetan, and I'm sure the English translation is right next to the Tibetan phonetic translation. For those of you who are confused which to read, because of course you wish to understand the meaning on one hand. on the other hand, you want to get the benefit. And you kind of want to also follow the rhythm of everyone. So decisions, you know. So therefore, should we begin the walk with the right foot or the left foot sort of thing? Of course you need both. But for the occasion, I would simply say that to follow the Tibetan phonetic, because right now you're practicing as a group, as a team, one could say. Although of course team sounds strange, but nevertheless in unison. When you're all together here, then you read the Tibetan phonetic. It helps the rhythm, you know. And you don't have to worry about the benefit, because these Tibetan words are not the kind of Tibetan words that we Tibetans use during every day. Those are sort of what is known as ordinary Tibetan, which are not perfect actually, which are improper. Basically, most of them are slangs and swearing words and all the other junks that we could think of. But nevertheless, those words that are there in the text were founded a long time ago. Not to explain it in an academic way, but they took place long time ago. And they were composed by none other than actually experienced, realized individuals known as Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And so therefore they had made sure they were excellent scholars, they were excellent linguists, they were excellent translators, and most importantly they were excellent meditators. So therefore they understood the concepts, they perfectly understood concepts, and they perfectly understood reality. And so therefore they were able to put together both in the most perfect, in the most harmonious way, harmonious order, and they found each of those letters and verbs and nouns and consonants and so on. So they were phrased in such a way that there is no flaw at all. And so the chanting master's duty is to basically make sure that his or her breathing is good, the voice is good, and the voice is soothing, of course, not too coarse, not too low, and so that we will all be able to follow that rhythm. And so therefore, because as I said, the way it's composed is such that it's also blessed, you know, by Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. That when they compose these texts, they don't just do it one day when they are brushing their teeth and thinking that, I think I'll write that, you know. It's not like that. They really take time and they really take pleasure, genuine pleasure in writing it. And then they seek their teachers, they seek their Dhamma friends, and then they seek their, wisdom aspects to grant the permission to compose these. And so therefore it is known now for those who are enthusiasts in terms of the details of who protects them, who sort of gives the guarantee and so on. The Dhammapalas protects these words. The wisdom aspects gives all of the accomplishments And of course, most importantly, and the teacher, the spiritual guide, gives their blessing. And so therefore, they are known as the perfect speech. So therefore, it is really possible for us to have blind devotion, actually, in this case. In the most sort of backward sense, really blind devotion, when we read the Tibetan phonetic. Yes. So follow the melody and so on. But having said that, when you read the same scripture or the practice individually at your home or wherever you are, then obviously I would encourage you to read the translation of whatever language is available, so that according to whatever language you are accustomed to or that you are brought up with, then you get an that you use the bridge to use that your own mother's tongue as a bridge to actually understand, to absorb the actual meaning. So in that manner, then I welcome all of you to practice this Chandesic sadhana.
Soy Gom jai loi doi dalai warai chen je loi nam doi ngoi voi che gue soi ba shin jere yai mai yin jere yai charai vai Mai gai roi barai charai gom jen lai Koroi de ye me doi barai chen ye lai Ke wai guen doi yan doi lai ma Dalai me je je pai lai long je jing Sai dai laim je yen de rai zon ne Dorai je chai je ga ba nyarai dai che dan zoi je chon nam la san joi barai doi dan ne ja soi je dai je gom de je be sen nam je do lai ben je re san je de bai shoi san je che dan coi je cho nam lai san je barai doi dan ne cha soi je dai je gom de je be sun nam je do lai ben je re san je de barai shoi san je che dan coi je cho nam lai san je barai doi dan je dai je gom de je be san nam je do lai ben je san je de bai soi gai je bai sem chen je che zoi be garai da ve den she le ba choi che re se kara zai ve zere nga den chu Ze zoi do je chen je se choi je dai boi tala jara je wo ne she je be gara nai tala dai ren je den je je re dai ba be de yo zoi bai me be wo jen jen shan nian dora je je zhong shui zhe me da wa rai jia dian bai kiam ne wen de wo wo jia rai zhuo wai jen jen ma gui gan dai karai zo zan je je we lan jen do je jen jen zho lai zi je re se lai cha cai lai choi wai jen jen ma 도제 젠젠 졸라세 제레zel라이 자차일라이 저바이 젠젠 마그 건다인 가를 조선 젠젠 도제 젠젠 졸라세 제레zel라 차달라이 바이바이 제레zel완다 조주드자이 셔바이 냐라와 세제담젤라이 군네다베 차차일라이 메도이드베 마라멘제 샬라이제 라소바이 원자예제 전nem볼 보이베 초이게 셰솔솔 도이마이메네 다데바르 메제저다이 자맹아이 셈네냐모이 완저라이베 네보이 담제 샤바라이제 년데란자이 잔저셈 소소이 제보이 라소베 대소이 제보이 제사베 순나이 라네 나예랑 셈제 남제 삼반다 로예 제자 제다왈 제자이 대모이 택바예 제제 고라와이 제세마도임바르 냐니메다이 도제예 도앙아이 자즈이 젠와예 세멘제 남라이 세소소이 나이제스 나임 제사이본 다만제 잔저이 저러저러이네 렘보 메도인 드와예 렘베 바도 다이 저러이제 대단 제제 소다이베 보베 꿀레버스레주 마달레노인 출라이제장 제는데와 젠제생 난제 젠즈랭아이슴 제르제와이 고소인톡 난 예레메조 오이마네베메 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 Bai Shang De Jing Lo Meng Gu Bei Dam Jie Bei De Jie Ra Bai Bei Nian De Ye Jie De Jie Chen Zhang Ne Ye Me Wan Dai Ai Wan Jie Jie Lai Jie Rai Cao Me Jie Ru Zoi Jie Lai Mai Ye Dai Lai Zoi Dai Bai Wai Kan Zoi Jie Jie Cao Jie Zhang Dun Jie Nam Gai Zhe Shen De Ba Rai Jie Rai Jie Da Kun Dai Za Bei La Mai Chi Kun Zhoi Kun Dai Za Bei La Ma Chi Chi Zhoi Kun Dai Za Bei La Mai Chi Jie Bai Jie Zhoi Bere Jie Na Sa Jie Ba Lai De Lai Ma Ran Zhoi Jie Mai Ne Jie Zhai Gra Dai Jie Ba Rai Jie Ba Rai Jie Jie Lai Bai Na Ma Te Zhe Ngai Jie Da Dora Jie Le Bai Zeng Ge Shen Zhong Dai Gra Na Dora Jie Jie Lai Bai La Soi Be Gra Mai Bai Ye Den Bai Zhuan A Lai Sa Me Shang A De Zeng A Choi Ji Dora Mai Zai Jie Be Za Am Re Dai Zai Jie Ra Da Yan Zai Che Ba Rai Ji De Yang A Dai Sa Be Che Ba Dai De Ge Na Ye Be Zai Che Be Che Ge Jie Jie Dai Yan De Ne Zo Ba De Ne Zi Lai Jie Jie Dai Bei Gu Sa Mai Jie De Bai Ma Le Bai Ye De Ba Rai Jie Che La De So La Wai Da Bai Ne Da Zoi Ge Lai Choi Dai De Man Jie Ngai Zhi Bai Den Da De Lai Zo Wai Dong Jie Ba Rai Ne Me Ba Lai Jie Ru Jie Ye Lai Sam Jie 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 Sam Ye La Zhom Ne Gra Mai Bai Ye She Ba Kun Ne Dai Jie Ma Le Nye Ra Dai Zhe Bai Dong Gra Mai Bai Ye Den Lai Ne Che Na Mai Dai Jie Ta La Wa Shen Dai Lo Bai Ye Ne Bai Da Dai Nye De Ca Lai De So Lai Te Da Ra Che De De Be Je Wai De Mai Jie Rai Zhe Wai Sem Je Dam Je Guen Zo Be San Je Gue Bai Dai Je Re Ngo Ye Ma Wai Ngon Za Rai San Je Na Wa Da Ye Da Ye Sui Je Wai Da Je Chen Bai Da Yen Da Chen Bai Da Je Da Na Lai San Je Chang Je Pa Me Gra Je De Jie Wan Zai Ba Dai Me Ba Ye De Wai Jie Jie Cha Be Jie shin dene chebe Jarama doi je wai shen je parama cheba ro te roi jene nande shalado shoi de je dai je me lai dai bai de cho jo zan je ja zen dam je je me ro la de so te ya dai ben zan je ya awai bo da na ye so wai cho de ja la wai se je go zo ni zo la je ye ran da je de zo je za bai kun jo san la che ba bo ja ve te bai pe jo je wai zi mi je gue la ngo zhe ge san je doi zhe rai je zai dam je che de na xian je lai min je rai je ne da ne co zai de che re ne me nyan do be che de sa je ne je rai na je che be je ma dai de vai jen de je rai che ke ne pe mai ka che de le ten de la san je sho chan jo je zen do che be wa de mai jo se nan de ye tam je se ba ne to ne ne be da nai pam je ne ke ga nai che ba lai troi ba ye se be toi le do wai shoi chan ja sem ne ren bo che ma je bai nai je ro che ke bai nyai bai me ba dang ko